Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So the hits just keep coming. I mean, spoiler season week for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty is finally here, but spoiler season has not technically started. It actually starts on Thursday, and at the time of this recording, this is Tuesday. And like I've said plenty of times, unexpectedly, we have gotten a ton of pre-spoilers. Again, not confirmed. I need to keep saying that. So disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. These are not confirmed to be actual cards, but they all seem really legit, especially these new Precons. And yeah, if you haven't seen my episode from earlier today on the new Precon Commander Mecha, make sure you go check that episode out, but not until you watch this one. Because this episode is on the other exciting Precon with the modified Precon, and yeah, we've got some more commanders spoiled with this. And this is all pretty crazy because basically the Precons aren't supposed to be revealed until 2 weeks from now, but we've got some early images that popped up on the internet. So with that said, let's jump into it. So this image recently popped up on Reddit from an eBay listing apparently, and yeah. I don't know how much more legit you can get than this. Again, obviously, though I am giving the disclaimer that these have not been confirmed to be real, this would take an insane amount of effort that it would definitely not be worth it to do to try to fake these. I mean, first up, you'd have to make the card, you have to print the card, you've got to make that look incredibly legitimate, and then actually make and print the actual packaging too. So yeah, like I said with the other Precon that I went over and this one, I am very, very, very convinced that these are real, and I think you should be too. Regardless, come to your own conclusions, and again, take everything I say with a grain of salt, please. And also, again, a big thank you to MTG.design for existing. You're a fantastic website, and yeah, just makes it really easy for me to discuss custom cards like this one instead of just looking at the packaging card the entire time. So we've got Chishiro the Shattered Blade, a 4/4 snake samurai that costs 2 red-green, and again, my apologies if I mispronounce any names in this episode, I am probably bound to. Regardless, it has whenever an aura or equipment enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 red spirit creature token with menace. And equipment, auras you control, and counters are modifications. Now, please correct me below in the comments below if I'm incorrect on this, but I believe this is the first actual kind of real definition that we've seen for modified, at least one that's as clear as this. Modified appears to be something like historic, where it's like kind of like a grouping of things where it's like, hey, you know, with historic, okay, we've got sagas, legendary cards, and artifacts are all historic, and with this, modified means that, hey, if your creature has an equipment on it, or it's got an aura on it that you control, which is very specific, or any counters on it, those are considered modifications. Now, I do find it really interesting that it's very specific on auras for whatever reason, again, auras you control, but we'll leave that to a different day for that kind of a discussion. That being said, this is a very interesting and unique commander. If you're getting auras and equipment onto the battlefield under your control, you're going to get a lot of 2/2 red spirits that have menace. So with the right build, you can build an army and go wide pretty quickly. But you can also make your army even deadlier by, again, at the beginning of your end step, you get a counter on each modified creature you control. So whether you've got an equipment attached to a creature or an aura attached to them, or, you know, if you've got a counter on them already, that counts and they're going to get a counter. So obviously your creatures might be getting pumped by either those equipment or those auras or, you know, any counters on them, but they're going to keep growing and growing throughout the game by getting more counters on them. And keep in mind that essentially all you have to do is get to your end step with one of your creatures having any kind of a modification on it. It doesn't matter if they're temporarily equipped with something. Once they get that counter on it from the trigger, that's going to count as a modification from then on out. So essentially then you're free to, move an equipment if that's what was on them to go modify something else to get that thing a counter on it then, and the one that had previously gotten the counter just keeps building more and more counters. So again, this commander can be very effective at going wide and going tall at the same time. Also, again, with this potential box reveal, we've got a couple of cards to discuss, but we don't have the entire precon, obviously, at this point. But I'm going to take you through some already existing cards that can work fantastically with this commander. First up, some auras that I really want to highlight are cards like Crown of Flames, Mark of Fury, and Rancor. Now, auras have been considered for a long time, and rightfully so, to be pretty weak in many formats, including Commander, because, well, it's an investment that can easily be lost. Let's say, again, you attach a bunch of auras onto a creature, and then that creature goes away just, from your opponent using one spell on taking out that creature. Well, you just got either 2 or 3 for 1. And that's not a good way to go about trying to get value. That being said, your commander is providing you a lot of value just for getting an aura into play. Again, you're getting a 2/2 with Menace anytime you do so. So, Crown of Flames is an aura that just costs a red, and it also has pay a red, return Crown of Flames to its owner's hand. So essentially for this deck's purposes, this is, hey, pay red, make a 2/2 with Menace, and you can keep doing that again, and again, and again. With this in combination with your commander just becomes a token generator that you can just dump mana into to make a lot of tokens. Next up, Mark of Fury is an aura that costs a red, and it has Enchanted Creature gains haste, which is nice, and also says at the end of turn, return Mark of Fury to its owner's hand. So unlike Crown of Flames, we can't actually pay to bounce this, but it bounces itself for free at the end of the turn. So a somewhat slower, but mana-wise more efficient way to make tokens. And then Rancor is an aura that costs a green. It's going to get +2/+0 in trample, which is very nice, and also when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Rancor to its owner's hand. So this not only can help us get damage through, but it can also come back to our hand again, just like Mark of Fury or Crown of Flames, so we can just keep getting more and more spirits in play. Also, keep in mind that green especially is a fantastic color for recursion, so there are a lot of ways to get things back from our graveyard if they happen to go there. So whether that's auras or equipment, if they're dealt with, we can get them back and get more value out of them. And speaking of equipment, there are a lot of fantastic low-to-the-ground pieces of equipment that we can utilize with things like Shuko and Paradise Mantle. Shuko is an equipment that just costs 1 and it costs 0 to equip, and it says equipped creature gets +1/+0. So again, for just 1 mana, by casting this and getting it into play, we're going to be getting a 2/2 Spirit with Menace. On top of that, again, this is a fantastic way to meet that modified requirement for one of our creatures. Again, it has equip 0, so we can just move it onto a creature. At the beginning of our end step, we're going to get a counter on them. Then that creature is essentially permanently modified, so then we can move this onto something else next turn. Then that creature becomes modified, gets a counter on it. Then we do it again, and again, and again. You see where this is going. And of course, there are equipment out there like Paradise Mantle that actually costs 0, so again, this in combination with our commander is just, hey, make a 2/2 Spirit with Menace for free. And also, again, this is a fantastic card just in its own right. Pay 1 to equip, and equip creature has tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So, ramping, making free spirits with Menace, modifying creatures, what's not to like? And speaking of modifying creatures, Metallic Mimic and other cards like it can be fantastic at doing so. It's a 2/1 shapeshifter for 2, and when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and the Metallic Mimic is the chosen type in addition to its other types. But most importantly, each other creature you control with the chosen type enters the battlefield with an additional counter on it. So we put this in play, we choose Spirit, and now all of our spirits are going to be coming into play with a counter on them. So first up, them just being 3/3s with Menace makes them even deadlier, and again on top of that, they already meet that modified requirement then because they already have a counter on them. So we don't have to equip them with anything or enchant them with anything, we just automatically meet that modified requirement, so when it hits our end step, all of our spirits are going to keep getting counters. And of course in green there are plenty of other ways to get counters on our creatures, so make sure you keep those in mind. Now depending on what direction you take this build, some other kinds of cards that you might want to consider are cards like Paragon of Fierce Defiance, Life Spinner, and even Clash of Realities. Paragon of Fierce Defiance is a 2/2 human warrior that says other red creatures you control get +1/+1, and by paying a red you can tap and another target red creature you control gains haste until end of turn. Again, keep in mind that those spirits that your commander is making are red, obviously, so this can help pump them, and on top of that, of course, it can help give your red creatures haste to help you be more aggressive. Next up, if you want to lean into Spirit Tribal a bit, definitely consider Life Spinner. It has tap, sacrifice 3 spirits, search your library for a legendary spirit card and put it into play, then shuffle your library. There are actually quite a few powerful legendary spirits out there, so yeah, being able to just tutor one up by sacrificing 3 of your tokens can be a huge play. And speaking of huge plays, one that can be very risky, but also very rewarding if it works out, is Clash of Realities. It's an enchantment for 3 and a red, and it says, all spirits have, when this creature comes into play, you may have it deal 3 damage to target non-spirit creature. And of course, all non-spirit creatures have, when this creature comes into play, you may have it deal 3 damage to target spirit. Obviously, if you've got a spirit engine going and you're able to make a ton of spirits, great, you can start dealing a lot of damage to those non-spirits out there, and chances are your opponents don't have a lot of spirits. Or more likely, any. Obviously, this is risky though, because when your opponents do have their non-spirits come into play, well, they can just have them ping your little spirits and take them out. But if you've got enough anthems in play or enough counters on your spirits, obviously they can survive at least one hit from this. Again, a high risk, high reward play that I just want to point out in case you are leaning into spirits a bit. That being said, a much less risky play comes with a card like Tribal Unity. It's an instant for X2 and a green, and it says creatures of the creature type of your choice get +X/+X until end of turn. So yeah, an instant speed buff that can pump our spirits, which are already pretty evasive, that can be an incredibly deadly thing. And speaking of deadly, let's talk about Beastmaster Ascension, an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control attacks, you may put a quest counter on Beastmaster Ascension, and as long as it's got 7 or more quest counters on it, creatures you control get +5/+5. This is an incredible Anthem effect. Again, with a deck like this, it's going to be very easy for you to get 7 counters on this, and then your spirits, just by them coming into play, again, they're going to be 2/2s with Menace, but with this, they're going to be 7/7s with Menace. So yeah, your spirits can get incredibly deadly with this. And of course, there are plenty of other ways in these colors to make your creatures even deadlier, with something like Berserker's Onslaught, an enchantment that says attacking creatures you control have double strike. So again, by making your creatures modified and getting counters on them, those counters essentially become doubly as effective at helping you dish out damage. But yeah, overall this new commander I think is going to lead to a lot of interesting and unique builds. But speaking of interesting commanders, well, let's move on to the back side of the box where we see 3 other cards. And well, okay, one we can see in full, whereas the other 2, some of them are somewhat cut off, but let's just jump into the one that we can see in full in first, and this is going to be the other commander option from this precon, and then we'll tackle the other 2 at the end. And again, a big thank you to MTG.design for helping me build this custom card. Anyways, Kaima the Fractured Calm. It's a 3/3 spirit that costs 2 red-green, and it says, at the beginning of your end step, goad each creature your opponents control that's enchanted by an aura you control. Put a +1 counter on Kaima the Fractured Calm for each creature goaded this way. Yeah, I was not expecting a Enchantress goading aura-focused commander, but I am very happy that we are seeing this because it looks like it's an absolute blast to play. Essentially, by getting auras onto your opponent's creatures, you might be making them more powerful in some ways, but you're also forcing your opponents to send those creatures at someone else. And then for every single one of those aura-goated creatures, if that's what we want to call it, anyways, you're going to be growing your commander to hit your opponents even harder. Which of course is going to be pretty easy to hit your opponents if you keep, goading your opponent's creatures and they don't have any blockers left, to actually block your commander. Again, this is a very unique commander that can definitely lead to a very interesting build, which we really haven't seen so far. And of course, we don't know what's in the precon, but that being said, let's tackle some cards that you might want to consider that might or might not be in that precon, I guess. First up, some somewhat similar cards from the previous commander that I want to bring up are cards like Whip Silk and Fortitude. Whip Silk is an aura that just costs a green, and it has pay a green, return Whip Silk to its owner's hand. So again, like Crown of Flames, this is an aura that we can easily bounce back to our hand when we're, wanting to goad something else. Again, by goading the creature, we are forcing it to attack an opponent, and sometimes it's going to be attacking into an unfavorable situation. So instead of just losing our aura with that creature, well, before that creature's about to die, we just bounce this back to our hand so we can use it again. Next up, Fortitude is an aura that costs 1 and a green, and it says when it's put into a graveyard from play, return Fortitude to its owner's hand, and if we really want to, we can sacrifice a forest to regenerate enchanted creature. So first up, you can actually just use this to protect your commander if you really want to, or, again, just put it on an opponent's creature, goad that creature until it, goes away, and then we get this back, and then we can goad another creature, and then we can get it back, and so on and so forth. And speaking of getting things back, we can actually get a ton of auras back from our graveyard, in fact all of them, with a card like Creeping Renaissance. It says choose a permanent type, return all cards of the chosen type from your graveyard to your hand, and it's got flashback so we can do it again. So there are plenty of other fantastic auras out there that we're going to want to utilize that might not be able to get themselves back like Whip Silk and Fortitude, but we can have plenty of other ways to get them back in this kind of a deck, again like Creeping Renaissance. We can also take advantage of all these aura-goated creatures with something like Bedlam, which, well, can just spread a bit of chaos in combat, and who doesn't want that? It's an enchantment for 2 red, and it just says creatures can't block. So now our aura-goated creatures are guaranteed to get through, and you know what? So is our giant commander. Though obviously you should be very careful when you are playing this. But when you are playing this enchantment, as well as our other enchantments and our auras, we can benefit from things like our Gothian Enchantress, and of course Enchantress's Presence. Our Gothian Enchantress has Shroud, and it says whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. Enchantress's Presence does that exact same thing, but without the Shroud. Enchantresses like these can give us a ton of value throughout the game, just helping us draw card after card after card, and they can be incredibly effective again with those auras like Whip Silk that we can just bounce back to our hand and recast to draw more cards. And of course, with those enchantresses, we can also get value out of other types of auras with things like Curse of Bloodletting and Curse of Opulence, which of course are curses. Curse of Bloodletting says enchant player. If a sorcerer deal damage to enchanted player, deals double that damage to that player instead. So we can put a massive target on a player's back, and again, if our opponent's creatures are already goated and they have to swing, well, might as well swing where it's gonna hurt the most. And your opponents are especially going to want to swing at the player that's got Curse of Opulence on them. It's an aura curse that just costs a red mana, and it says whenever enchanted player is attacked, create a colorless artifact token named Gold. It has sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Each opponent attacking that player does the same. So yeah, your opponents are going to be further incentivized to attack that player, and when they do, you also get a benefit from it as well. And of course, outside of aura curses, there are other ways to incentivize players to attack one of your opponents with something like Crown of Doom. It says whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and by paying 2, target player other than Crown of Doom's owner gains control of it, activate this ability only during your turn. Basically, it comes into play under your control, but after that, you give it to someone else, and then it can never be given back to you. So again, just further incentive for your opponents to attack that player that has the crown, so that they can dish out the most damage when they're forced to attack with their creatures anyways. And obviously, a nice additional benefit is that this, and a card like Curse of Bloodletting, helps your commander hit even harder. And yeah, taking your opponents out with commander damage is a very real thing. So again, outside of auras, make sure you're finding ways to, make your commander even deadlier. I mean, maybe that's doubling counters, or getting, equipment on it, etc., etc., etc. Regardless, definitely an interesting and unique commander that's going to lead to a very interesting build. Next up, one of the other 2 cards on the back that again is somewhat hidden. A good amount of the text can actually be either, seen or kind of guessed upon. So this is the internet's best guess as to what this, full card looks like with Aki Battle Squad. At this point, we don't know the power of the toughness because that was hidden, so question mark, Goblin Samurai that costs 5 and a red. It says whenever 1 or more modified creatures you control attack, untap all modified creatures you control, and after this combat phase, the traditional combat phase. This ability triggers only once each turn. So yeah, extra combat on a body can be a very powerful thing. Now it does have obviously a requirement that you need at least 1 modified creature to even get that extra combat, and again, that extra combat is probably only going to be for modified creatures because they have to untap if they're modified. But yeah, that can be a very powerful thing in the right deck. And then the other card that was somewhat hidden, again, so some of these parts are actually guesses from the internet, but we're just going to go with these best guesses. A 0/5 Ogre Samurai for 1 green named Kosai Penitent Warlord. It has as long as Kosai is enchanted, equipped, and has a counter on it, Kosai has, whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, you draw that many cards, and Kosai deals that much damage to each other opponent. So this is the Voltron of Voltron commanders. I mean, you need to have it enchanted, equipped, and have a counter on it, but when you do, that payoff is massive. Because obviously with those counters and the enchantments and the equipments, you're going to bring its power up hopefully above 0, so you can draw a good amount of cards and dish out a ton of damage to all of your opponents. So again, there is a pretty steep requirement to actually get this going, but with a deck built around it, there are plenty of ways that you can pretty much guarantee that you're going to be able to get those things to happen. And yeah, And when that happens, you're going to be able to snowball very quickly, drawing a ton of cards and dishing out damage to all of your opponents, no matter who you actually hit. Regardless, a really interesting design, and yeah, we'll see what the exact text might be. It might differ from this just a little bit, you know, in about, 2 weeks when the actual precons are spoiled. That being said, yeah, I am really excited about these new cards and these new commanders, and I'm sure a lot of players out there are as well. I never thought I would see 2 Gruul commanders that can be focused on auras and enchantress, and, well, they both go about it in a very unique and fun way. One helps you go wide by playing more and more auras and making you a spirit army, you know, with menace, and it can also grow them itself when you have those modified creatures. And the other one takes in a completely different direction where you want to get those auras onto your opponent's creatures and then make Kaima just absolutely massive and, yeah, being able to get through after your opponents have to attack each other with their goated creatures. So each can be built in very exciting ways. Regardless, we will see exactly what these precons are and what's going to be in them here in, I believe, about 2 weeks. But again, make sure you're staying tuned to this channel for more potential spoilers. Again, I think we've got one more day of potential spoilers tomorrow, so we'll see if anything else comes out then. But actual spoiler season starts on Thursday, the 27th, so make sure you're staying tuned to this channel for that as well. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.